An Iranian-supplied drone, launched by proxy forces, has struck a commercial vessel in the Red Sea, less than 100 nautical miles from a U.S. naval task force. Will this calculated escalation be the miscalculation that triggers a direct, full-scale war in the Persian Gulf? The operational environment has fundamentally shifted in the last 72 hours. This is not a random act of piracy. It is a strategic message, delivered via high explosives, and approved by the highest levels of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The attack represents a deliberate test of American resolve, and a dangerous escalation in a shadow war that is now threatening to break into open conflict. The targeted vessel, the MV Fortune, was operating under a Liberian flag, but is owned by a firm with ties to a key U.S. ally. The drone used in the attack has been identified by wreckage analysis as a variant of the Shahed 136, the same model Tehran has supplied in thousands to its proxies across the Middle East and to Russia for use in Ukraine. This incident cannot be viewed in isolation. It is the latest move in a coordinated campaign of harassment and aggression designed to challenge U.S. naval supremacy and disrupt global commerce. Tehran is leveraging its network of proxies, the Houthis in Yemen, militias in Iraq and Syria, and Hezbollah in Lebanon, to wage a war of attrition against American interests, all while maintaining a thin veneer of deniability. The objective is clear: to increase the political and economic cost of the American presence in the region to an unsustainable level. The United States Central Command, or CNTCOM, now faces a critical decision point. A non-response would be interpreted as weakness, inviting further, more brazen attacks. A disproportionate response could provide Tehran with the pretext it seeks to rally regional support and attempt a closure of the world's most critical energy choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. Every option on the table carries immense risk. The Pentagon's strategic calculus is under immense pressure, balancing the need for deterrence against the catastrophic potential of a regional conflagration that would send shockwaves through the entire global economy. The world is watching. The next move will be decisive. In response to the escalating threat profile, the Pentagon has initiated a significant force posture adjustment. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, previously on station in the eastern Mediterranean, has been ordered to transit the Suez Canal and take up a new operational box in the North Arabian Sea. This is not a routine deployment. This maneuver places over 70 combat aircraft, a squadron of B-52 Stratofortress bombers on standby in Qatar, and an undisclosed number of F-35 stealth fighters within immediate striking distance of key Iranian military and nuclear facilities. The carrier is accompanied by a Ticonderoga-class cruiser and a squadron of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, forming a multi-layered air and missile defense shield. The Pentagon calls this a deterrent. The official language from Washington speaks of de-escalation and the protection of international shipping lanes. But intelligence analysts are asking a different question. Is Washington being drawn into a conflict on Tehran's terms, in a waterway Iran has spent decades preparing to turn into a kill zone? The strategic doctrine at play is escalation dominance, the ability to meet and defeat an adversary at every level of potential conflict. The United States possesses overwhelming conventional military superiority. On paper, a conflict would be swift and decisive. However, Iran's strategy is not built to win a conventional war. It is designed to inflict unacceptable costs. Tehran's playbook is asymmetric. It relies on a three-pronged approach: proxy warfare, swarm tactics, and anti-access/area denial, or A2/AD, capabilities. Its IRGC Navy is not designed to fight fleet-on-fleet battles with U.S. carriers. Instead, it would deploy hundreds, potentially thousands, of small, fast-attack craft armed with cruise missiles and torpedoes in coordinated swarm attacks, seeking to overwhelm the defenses of larger, less maneuverable warships. Simultaneously, land-based anti-ship ballistic missiles, like the Khalij Fars or Persian Gulf missile, would be fired from concealed locations along the Iranian coast. These weapons are difficult to track and intercept, posing a significant threat to multi-billion-dollar naval assets. The final layer of this strategy involves the extensive use of naval mines, both sophisticated and crude, to render the 21-mile-wide Strait of Hormuz impassable. Closing the strait, even for a few days, would have an immediate and catastrophic effect on the global economy. Over 20% of the world's total oil consumption and approximately 35% of all seaborne traded oil passes through this choke point. A closure wouldn't just be a regional crisis. It would trigger a global economic shockwave. What does this mean for your energy costs, your investments, and the stability of global supply chains. The immediate impact would be a spike in crude oil prices, potentially exceeding $200 per barrel, according to analysts at major financial institutions. This would translate directly to higher gasoline prices for consumers, increased operating costs for businesses, and a surge in inflation globally. Industries reliant on petroleum, from airlines to plastics manufacturing, would face severe disruption. Defense and energy stocks would likely see significant volatility, while global indices would enter a period of extreme uncertainty. The disruption to liquefied natural gas, or LNG, shipments, particularly to Europe and Asia, would create an energy security crisis far exceeding the one precipitated by the conflict in Ukraine. This economic vulnerability is the cornerstone of Tehran's deterrent. They are betting that the world's dependence on the free flow of energy through Hormuz gives them leverage against the United States' military might. The IRGC's calculation is that the political fallout from a global recession would be a greater deterrent to Washington than the threat of retaliatory military strikes. This is Iran's poison pill strategy. They may not be able to win the fight, but they believe they can make the victory so costly that no rational actor would initiate it. The U.S. naval presence is therefore not just a military force. It is a guarantee to the global markets that this vital artery of commerce will remain open, by force if necessary. While naval fleets posture in the Gulf, the real battle may be unfolding in cyberspace and on the world's financial networks. The shadow war between the U.S. and Iran has long been fought in the digital domain, a gray zone of espionage, sabotage, and influence operations that rarely makes headlines but carries strategic weight. Iranian state-sponsored hacking groups, with designations like Charming Kitten and APT-33, have a documented history of targeting critical infrastructure in the United States and its allied nations. Their targets have included financial institutions, port authorities, electrical grids, and water treatment facilities. These are not simple acts of cybercrime. They are preparations of the battlefield. In the event of open conflict, intelligence agencies assess with high confidence that Iran would unleash a barrage of destructive cyber attacks. The goal would be to sow chaos, disrupt military logistics, and create a domestic crisis within the U.S. to erode public support for the war effort. A successful attack on a major U.S. stock exchange or a regional power grid is a scenario that national security planners take extremely seriously. The next shot fired might not be a missile, but a malicious line of code aimed at a power grid or a stock exchange. How vulnerable are Western economies to this new form of warfare? The interconnectedness of modern digital infrastructure is both a strength and a profound vulnerability. A single successful intrusion could have cascading effects, disrupting everything from banking transactions to transportation systems. On the other side of this equation is the relentless economic pressure the United States has applied to Iran through a comprehensive sanctions regime. These sanctions have crippled Iran's economy, slashing its oil revenues and isolating it from the international financial system. The resulting domestic unrest and economic hardship are a constant source of pressure on the regime in Tehran. This economic warfare is a double-edged sword. While it is intended to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions and limit its funding for regional proxies, it also provides the hardliners within the regime a powerful justification for their aggressive posture. They frame their actions not as aggression, but as resistance against what they term economic terrorism from the West. This narrative fuels their resolve and makes de-escalation politically difficult. The situation has now reached a precarious equilibrium. The United States and Iran are locked in a cycle of escalation, with each action and reaction pushing them closer to a precipice. The question is no longer if a miscalculation will happen, but when, and what the precise trigger will be. Several scenarios are being actively wargamed within the intelligence community. Scenario 1 is limited retaliation. In this outcome, the U.S. responds to the drone strike with a series of targeted, proportional strikes against the specific proxy group responsible, as well as their command and control infrastructure. The strikes are calibrated to send a clear message without targeting Iranian sovereign territory directly. Iran, having made its point, might choose to absorb the blow and temporarily de-escalate, returning the conflict to the shadows. Scenario 2 is the Hormuz Gambit. Provoked by a larger U.S. strike, or believing it has a strategic window of opportunity, Iran attempts to implement its A2AD strategy. It deploys mines in the Strait of Hormuz and targets international shipping with anti-ship missiles. This would immediately trigger a massive, pre-planned U.S. and allied military response, Operation Earnest Will 2.0, with the objective of reopening the strait by force. This scenario leads to a brief but exceptionally violent naval and air conflict, with devastating economic consequences. Scenario 3, the most dangerous, is regional conflagration. A direct U.S.-Iran exchange, whether accidental or intentional, quickly spirals out of control. Iran activates its entire proxy network, launching a multi-front assault. Hezbollah fires its vast rocket arsenal at Israel. Militias in Iraq and Syria attack U.S. bases, and the Houthis intensify their attacks in the Red Sea. This would ignite a multi-front war across the entire Middle East, drawing in regional powers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and risking a direct confrontation between global superpowers. The path between these scenarios is separated by an alarmingly thin margin of error. A single rogue commander, a faulty radar signal, or a piece of misinterpreted intelligence could be the spark that ignites the entire region. The pieces are on the board, and the pressure is mounting. Every diplomatic communication, every naval movement, and every satellite image is being scrutinized for intent. The strategic balance is held on a knife's edge. The coming days will be critical. The decisions made in Washington and Tehran will determine whether the long shadow war finally erupts into a catastrophic open conflict with global implications. The intelligence is clear. The risk of miscalculation is higher than it has been at any point in the last decade. For real-time analysis and unbiased operational briefs as this crisis unfolds, subscribe to Global Crisis